live. This is Basket Bros. It's another lovely Sunday evening. We are on the heels of spring. We're on the heels of March Madness. So be in tune in the next coming weeks. Actually, I think it's going to be next week. We're going to be doing a March Madness type episode. Tonight, as you know, it's going to be more throwback basketball talk. I am your moderator, Denzel Snipes. And once again, this is Basket Bros. Now, we've got a loaded show for you. We've got two great Basket Bros moment in time. We're going to talk about, the legend of Linsanity, and then also we're going to get to a Basket Bros legend that probably should have been covered earlier, but, better late than never. But let's get the guys in here coming all the way from the other C-Town, by way of the C-State. So he's in Charlotte, but he's from Connecticut, native Yankees fan and definitely a Hornets fan. Come on in here, DJ Willie V, Will Vogel. Come on in.
What's up? I should be the real CC Sabathia. Charlotte, Connecticut. But no, I'm doing great. Crazy weekend of college hoops. Unfortunately, my Tar Heels lost. But I'm ready for March Madness. Like, whether they're in it or not, I would love them in it, but I'm ready for March Madness.
Awesome, if your team can't... Yes, if your team's not in it, it's still great to enjoy, some of the... every year's full of, moments in March Madness, some of the best of the year. So, but also, we're not alone, you all. So coming on in here is the architect of the South Florida Tribune. He built the pyramids, he built the statues, he built the city of the South Florida Tribune. And he's not only the mayor, but he's the governor. He's the ruler of that planet. Come on in, Scott Morganrath.
Thank you very much, Denzel. Good to be back with you, Will. Yeah, we'll look forward to a good show. I'll definitely have a little bit of hometown love tonight with what we're going to be talking about. So it'll be really neat to talk about some great memories that I lived back in the past when times were much better in Detroit than unfortunately they are not now. So.
All right. And then last but not least, he's the only two-time guest on this show. Him and Scott go together like Batman and Robin. It all depends. One day one's Batman, the other day the other's Robin, and it could flip-flop. But this brother also representing Detroit City. He is a tremendous asset. Come on in here, Mr. George Icahn. How you doing?
I don't know how I can live up to that.
Well, you don't have to, George. You're Robin, and I'm Batman. So
he already stated who's who.
And Will Vogel, I'm crying in my beer too, as Michigan goes down to defeat in double overtime, and their scant chances are getting scanter by the minute of making the final, the tournament.
Absolutely. And so before we get started, just wanted to let everybody know that if you are a first-time viewer of Basket Bros, awesome. Come on in, kick your feet up, make yourself at home. Hit that like button, but more importantly, hit that subscribe button, because Sideline Sports is full of the latest and greatest sports action. We got a team out there covering the NFL National Scouting Combine right now. We also have we had a team that covered the Super Bowl just a couple of weeks ago. That footage is all loaded up. Then not just Basket Bros, we've got Pundit, we got Confidential, Sports Arena, The Gauntlet, Sideline Sports Show, you name it, we got it. Unfiltered Truth, Ball Don't Lie. We have a plethora of shows, as you have graciously seen in the opening video shot. So please leave a subscription to Sideline Sports and hang out with us for more than just one night. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get on with our first topic, and that is our Basket Bros legend, the one and only James Naismith. Now, to those of you all who's the less than general sports fan, okay, you've watched this magical game where you just put a ball in a hoop and yay, 2 points, or yay, 3 points. Then you see the other team that doesn't have the ball try to stop them from doing so. The inventor of that very game that we know and love today is Mr. James Naismith. Now, he actually was born in Canada, in Almonte, Canada West, Providence, Canada. He went to McGill University and also went to the University of Colorado. He actually was the head coach of Kansas basketball team. As a matter of fact, he founded that basketball program. He is in the FIBA Hall of Fame, the Canadian Basketball Hall of Fame, the Canadian Olympic Hall of Fame, Canadian Sports Hall of Fame, Ontario Sports Hall of Fame, Ottawa Sports Hall of Fame, Oklahoma State Sports Hall of Fame, McGill University Sports Hall of Fame. He's also, of course, in the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame, and he's in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. The James Naismith Memorial Trophy is awarded annually to NCAA basketball's top player, most outstanding player. So with that being said, you talk about a man who invented a game that became cultural, a worldwide sport. Very, very fair to say that. Basketball is way more known than a lot of other sports out there. Whoever thought that someone to invent a game like this would have such an impact, to go through of course the 60s and 70s, the golden age of the 1980s, on to the 90s, and into today's game that saw greats such as Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, LeBron James, you name it. It's all because of this man inventing this game right here. So I want to slide over to Will, because Will has some awesome commentary for us and some great factoids. So Will, take it away. Your commentary on James Naismith.
So first off, I want to say I've been to the Naismith Hall of Fame. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool place. If you haven't, I highly recommend you read the online document what the original rules of basketball are. It's just so cool because it's just so cool. I think it was like grab one regulation like soccer ball or utility ball, and you have a peach basket. Like, there's a bunch of rules on it. Like, I've read the document. It's really cool. It's a cool document to read. Anyway, Dr. James Naismith, the cool thing about him was he got to live through a lot of progression with the sport he invented. He got to see it become an Olympic demonstration sport. He saw it become an official event in the Olympics. He also got to see the birth of the NIT, the National Invitational Tournament, and see the birth of the NCAA tournament. He was also once the athletic director at Kansas as well. When he was inventing basketball, or before, he was at a YMCA and he was told by his supervisor, I want you to create a quote-unquote athletic distraction that's an indoor game. And he had 14 days to do so. He was also, like Denzel said, the first Kansas coach. And man, let's just say, I think he has the greatest coaching tree ever. We talk about Bill Parcells, how he spawned Bill Belichick, and he did Sean Payton and a few others. I think this guy tops it. This guy coached Vogel Allen, who later coached Kansas, who Vogel Allen coached Dean Smith, Adolph Rupp, and Ralph someone. I'm sorry, I forgot to write his last name. But we know that Dean Smith later went to coach on at Chapel Hill, who coached Roy Williams. And then we have Adolph Rupp, who led the legendary Kentucky program. And so, yeah, that coaching tree is just insane. And then the cool thing about Dr. James Naismith's hometown is every year his hometown hosts a 3v3 tournament for all ages and skill levels, and all the proceeds go to youth basketball programs in that area, which is awesome because that is just establishing a game, a beautiful game that's developed way back when, and it's still carried from year to year to year. Jay.
I muted myself for a second. Okay, so yes, great commentary, especially on the coaching trees. Because one thing that he was very good at, like any great leader, is creating other leaders as well. that right there in itself. And I'm a big fan on it's one thing to be you, but if you can create 10 more yous, now you're really doing something because you're contributing on to the future of whatever it is that you may be in, be it professional sports, the military, corporate America, anything like that. So most definitely great emphasizing on the coaching trees. I want to swing it to George Icahn here. Your thoughts on James Naismith, the great inventor of basketball?
Well, not bad for a guy who was 55-60 at Kansas, huh? A losing record. Not bad at all. What a great job Dr. Naismith has done. And isn't it ironic that the Hall of Fame could very well have been in Toronto or Montreal, let's say, instead of in Springfield, Mass. And obviously, he grew up there. He was a son of Scottish immigrants. His mom and dad came from the Scotland, and what a tremendous gift he left us. The sport has been like every sport, had its ups and downs, but what joy and what excitement basketball has created in the United States, Canada, and around the world. And Dr. Naismith gets a lot of credit for that. The old peach basket, rather, that he originally started out with is legendary now. And the awards named after him, as you mentioned, Denzel, the Halls of Fame, just an incredible gift he gave us. Like you said, an indoor sport. They told him to go out there, like you said, Will, create an indoor sport. And boy, he created one with lasting impact all around. Because think about all the people that have enjoyed this great sport of basketball. Kids on the sandlot, kids at the college level, kids at the high school and pro level, and all of us that maybe didn't have the skills, but we love watching it. And, people like Scott and I that covered it, had the privilege of covering all those great years of the NBA in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So, yeah, hats off to Naismith. I do want to get to the Hall of Fame, Will. I'm glad you've been there. I do want to get this on my bucket list, definitely to see that. And there's one man missing from that Hall of Fame that I'm going to plug right now, and his name is George Blaha. And I'm sorry, but it's a darn shame that George has not been given the Kurt Gowdy Award, I believe it's called, for broadcasting in the NBA, because certainly nobody else deserves it more than George right now for all of his career. But that's another topic for another day for the Naismith Hall of Fame.
Excellent commentary. Thank you so much for that. What this man did, it's crazy because you would think the majority of his accomplishments, he's in the Canadian side, so it could have easily been anywhere in Canada and such. So, yeah, awesome point on that one. But I want to swing it over to Scott finally. With the great players, great coaches, great announcers, even super fans, this man was the architect. He was the catalyst. So your thoughts on James Naismith?
Well, here's a few things. Naismith died 8 months after the birth of the NCAA championship, so we all know how that turned out. Also, he died at the age of 78 and is buried with his first wife in Memorial Park Cemetery in Lawrence. And I have a feeling that Mr. Naismith might be turning over his grave if he ever heard the words load management. Okay, number one, he would. And item number two, okay, aside from load management, Shannon Sharp made a very interesting comment on Undisputed with Skip and Shannon, where the three-point shot has taken over for the dunks. And as a result, because of that, the game has really, really gone backwards. So what can I tell you? I mean, I did have a chance to go to the Basketball Hall of Fame when it was in a different location. I hear they moved it, but it was still a lot of fun. I enjoyed my time there nonetheless, but his mark in history is what it is. You have an award named after you. You created the NCAA basketball championship, which we're going to be doing March Madness next week. So, you talk about the timing for which you guys came up with this subject leading into March Madness. You guys did a really great job tying the two together 1 week in advance. I mean, and you know what? I've worked with George Blaha. George Blaha, to me, is the most unheralded announcer in basketball. I think the only problem he's not getting a lot of publicity is he never had a lot of national opportunities. on any of the networks, and I think that impedes his ability to get the respect. A lot of broadcasters, if they've been on national TV for a lot of years, instead of being a steadfast local guy, they get recognized more by the national peers. And, George, with no disrespect, you being a hometown guy in Detroit, you're able to emphasize more on the local Metro Detroit area. Or me, on the other hand, I've been exposed to more of a national situation with what I do in these days and age. So, I totally get where you're coming from. I'd like to see George get in it, especially while he's alive. But, again, some of your best broadcasters have been national broadcasters that led to their induction into the Basketball Hall of Fame.
So I'll make a real quick point about the Basketball Hall of Fame. It's pretty cool, actually. For those who haven't been, it's cool because it shows you the development of the basket, how it was created from a peach basket, and it goes all the way to what we have nowadays. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. And
They
awesome.
let you shoot. They let you try it.
They let you try like all of the baskets? That's crazy.
It's really
well,
weird.
Let them shoot with today's group, firing it from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
You can't hit the backboard. There was no backboard.
There was no back. Yeah, that'd be something like Steph Curry's like, I'm gonna stand on this battleship out in the middle of the Atlantic. I'm gonna fire.
So you go from no backboard to no backbone with the NBA Players Association. Go for
good one. Good analogy.
Yeah, good one. Especially the part about load management. Like I don't think he would be all right with that at all. At all.
Magic Johnson went out there and talked about it this week, and I screenshotted what he put, and Magic's talking badly about it. Oh, Nelly. After all, he did get a coach fired, Paul Westhead.
For Pat Riley, yeah. Well, good way to segue into our next topic, and that is our first Basketbros moment in time. Want to touch on the 1994 NBA Finals. This is a moment that gets underrated because people talk about that team, but they don't talk about this specific moment. 94 NBA Finals Game 6. Elijah Warren's block on John Starks forces Game 7. I remember watching this one as a kid, and I saw Starks get the ball, and I was like, oh, man, because I know what kind of player Starks was. He goes up for seemingly a wide-open three. Elijah Warren comes flying out of nowhere, swats it. The summit, detonates, and it goes on to Game 7. I think it's pretty fair to say that without that block, and I get it. Who knows if it goes in or whatever? But without that block, Elijah Warren didn't even give the opportunity. It makes probably the block of his life. Sends it to Game 7 in the Summit. The Rockets win another close one, 90-84, to secure their first championship. But just want to swing it over to Will. Your thoughts about this shot. And where would you rank it as far as amazing plays?
Oh, it's definitely up there with some of the best defensive plays in finals history. The LeBron block against the Warriors. There's a lot of very underrated defensive plays.
Bosh's block on
NBA Finals history.
Yep.
Look at the LeBron block. Havlicek steals the ball. There's a lot of most of the plays in the finals that we know are offensive outputs that make them legendary moments. But there's a bunch of defensive ones too, like the ones I named and many, many more. Also, the cool thing about this was in Game 7, Houston won, and it brought Houston the first championship since the Oilers won the AL championship. He also outscored and outplayed Patrick Ewing that whole series. He is the first player, because of this, in this time, he was the first player to win MVP, Finals MVP, MVP, Finals MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. First guy to do that in one season. And
an NBA
championship. Exactly. And first foreign-born player to win an MVP. And the cool thing about Hakeem Olajuwon is there's a story that's out there where he flew from Africa to New York City, and he didn't know the weather. And he goes to the baggage handler, He says, "Why is it so cold here?" He's like, "Oh, this is a cold part of the US." He's like, "I don't like this. Is there somewhere I can go to play basketball, somewhere nice, somewhere warm?" So the guy gives him a ticket to Houston, flies to Houston, goes to baggage claim. One of the coaches for Houston, I don't know who it was supposedly there, or someone was there. Maybe it was a booster. Calls the Houston program and says, "There's this big, tall dude in the airport. He's lost. He looks like a basketball player. Get here, get the car service, and bring him to campus." And that's how he got to University of Houston.
Nice. And not to mention his sport all of his life up to that point was soccer. So he'd only
Yeah,
really been playing basketball like a few years, and he turned out amazing. I mean, not bad for a guy who, relatively picked up a new sport. He was a soccer player, like by trade, But I want to swing it to George on this one. So your thoughts on this play, quite possibly where you were when you watched it, and just your general thoughts on it.
Yeah, I would have been at my home watching in front of television. It was just a monster block. I mean, it was an unbelievable play by Olajuwon. And the funny thing is that when I researched this topic a little bit, Patrick Ewing, had a great series. Patrick Ewing, the center for the Knicks, had a wonderful series, albeit on a losing side. He set the record in this series, even though the Rockets won 4-3. Ewing had more blocks at that time than anybody ever had in the finals. Ewing averaged almost 19 points in that series, but Olajuwon was the killer. 27 points, almost, I think it was 26.9 per game in that series of 7 games. But yeah, Ewing set a record with 30 blocks in that series. So all I'm saying is we saw a number of great defensive plays with those two giants of the game, both of which, of course, are in the Hall of Fame right now, Olajuwon and Ewing. And I just remember that it was just wow. Like you said, it was just out of the blue. Starks had played very well. And Starks, he had an up and down career as well. The man was never drafted, 6'5", 180, never drafted in the NBA. And he got a look at Golden State, but then obviously the Knicks saw a lot in him and got him. But he was kind of like an underrated guy, Starks, and he had a very good series, of course. But it was a phenomenal play, a phenomenal defensive play. And like you said earlier, there are a lot of great defensive plays in the NBA Finals history, but this is right up there among them. And so what a great job that was. And by the way, if you're wondering, the game was called by Marv Albert and Matt Guokas on NBC.
love
Yes.
Marv Albert.
Yes, absolutely. I can still hear his calls like today at this time period during then. The classic NBA on NBC. Like that's what I think about. But swinging it over to Scott now. And I know you've seen your share of defensive plays in playoff history and NBA Finals history and whatnot. Just want to let you know your thoughts on. Just want to know your thoughts on this one, and also overall, Olajuwon versus Ewing, the heavyweight fight that that was so hyped up, that lived up to the hype.
Well, I've got a little different, quite a few layers here. Remember, Hakeem Olajuwon played for Phi Slama Jammer under Guy Lewis, so he nearly came. He came unfortunately for the University of Houston. Their free throw shooting didn't come to the championship game because they were heavy favorites against, I believe, North Carolina State and Jim Valvano. That's number one. Number two, okay, I've always thought that, to me, Hakeem Olajuwon's the most underrated or underappreciated big man out there, and he wins 2 championships. He's just a great all-around player, this guy. I mean, he really, really is a great all-around player. And I think he could have fared well against Jordan and the Bulls. We'll never know, because they were a very good basketball team is what they were. But it's funny how you talk about the geographics, because when you put into perspective that he went out there and played for Rudy Tomjanovich, former University of Michigan coach, or a player, I believe, right? But let's face it, he did a lot of good things in the city of Houston per se, not just with the Rockets, but with the Cougars. So, and I think if we have some Houston people watching our show here tonight, this guy's just unbelievable. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I saw Patrick Ewing play in the 1982 Final Four against Dean Smith over at Georgetown University, and undoubtedly one of the most memorable games. I bought tickets with a friend of mine. We took a Greyhound bus from South Florida all the way up to New Orleans. That was another drive in itself. I can make that drive in half the time the Greyhound people did, but we got there at some point anyhow. But, they did well in college, and then their skills transferred well over to the NBA. And, let's face the reality. I couldn't see Hakeem Olajuwon ever being a part of load management. I mean, as a lot of players in that era. Why do I keep bringing up load management? Well, I mean, again, that's just how it is. But, Will, you made up a good, really point. And while we also talk about offensive moments that stand out in big games, nobody should forget about the defensive efforts that have played into bigger games too. And well, you do make a really good point on that because, offense to me has always been fun to watch. Okay. But defense is what you call the dirty work. And a lot of great players that ever left a championship team that were defensive players, their teams regressed badly. I'll give you one that comes to mind, Dennis Rodman. When he left the place, they were in bad shape when it was over. So, yeah, I think it was definitely one of the best defensive plays. But you have to consider the fact that Hakeem Olajuwon is one of the most complete players that ever played the game. And, if he didn't know his sense of direction from Houston, New York, it's because his blood thinned and he wasn't looking to have any thicker blood. And I guess the one thing about him being from where he is his language would have been so limited. If he had to face the New York media, he wouldn't understand what the heck they were talking about anyway. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But no, he landed in a good place in Houston. I'm glad he had a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, and definitely the way the Rockets retained him and kept him here in Houston. I mean, the combination of him and Clyde Drexler, like what they did, in college was phenomenal and awesome that they reunited, 12 years later in Houston with that midseason trade, that sent Clyde Drexler to Houston, and Drexler finally got his ring and whatnot. This play right here was just great. Like I mentioned, Will Havlicek stealing the ball, and when Larry Bird steal from the inbound in that NBA Finals, and then also Chris Bosh's block on Danny Green to force Game 7 in the 13 Finals. And if you look at that play, it was identical to this one that we're talking about. If you're visiting it in your head, it's just from opposite sides of the court. That's the crazy part about it, But, I think it's a moment that doesn't get talked about enough. It propelled the Rockets to their first championship, even though Game 7 was a close one as well. But we're at the midpoint of the show. So when we come back, we're going to take a look at our second Basketbros moment in time. So in the beginning, I mentioned our plethora of wonderful shows. Here's that video once again.
We're back.
Yeah, I should point out too that when you talk about the Houston Rockets, that was their first of 2 championships in a row too. So, obviously it wasn't a one and done. They were able to have 2. So, evidently Denzel Snipes here is acting like Charlie Chaplin because we have a silent movie going on. Just kidding. But not
My
anymore.
video is still playing. Oh, okay, here we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, yeah,
Well,
something's
well, the
going on.
nickname
Like
to
the
Charlie is in
video.
Charlie Chaplin tonight, okay, Denzel, because I don't know if I saw a lot of silent movies, but that's okay. Just kidding with you tonight.
Oh no, I was having a little technical troubles here, but I'm back now. Everybody, you just saw once again our video of shows. So once again, hit the like and subscribe button and tune in because it's way more shows than what you're watching right now. Now, we're gonna do something a little different here, okay? Because I'm gonna introduce it. We'll give it a short topic, but this mostly is for the guys at the bottom here, okay? This is our second Basketbros moment in time. The 1990 NBA Finals Game 5. Vinnie Johnson's last second 14-footer delivers the second championship to Detroit. Vinnie Johnson, albeit a bench player, was one of the key members. His ability to come off of the bench and quickly get things going earned him the nickname Microwave. So when you talk about the shots in history, and I get it, you got Ray Allen's shot, you have LeBron's block, you got Kyrie
Michael
Irving shot,
Jordan.
Michael Jordan the shot exactly. This one right here, once again, doesn't get talked about. They went on to beat the Portland Trailblazers in 5 games. This shot right here definitely did the trick. So I'm going to kick it to Will, and then once Will is done, I'm going to actually keep this just Scott and George on the screen so they can have a conversation about this moment. Go ahead, Will.
So I'll say real quick, he averaged 12.2 points, 12.2 points per game in the finals, all being the 6-man. The Pistons were down 8 with under 10 minutes left in the game, and he went on a 9-0 run himself. But how cool is it that this guy, hence the nickname Microwave, hits the game winner? Like, I think that's one of the best nicknames of all sports, along with Sweetness, Air Jordan. Like, this guy was a microwave. He heats up fast, and he was 6 for 11 from the field that day. So definitely microwave-esque. Anyway, let's leave it to these two.
Yep. And now we're going to exit the screen. We'll leave it to the resident Pistons reps. You two have an awesome conversation about this moment because I'm sure you're going to remember where you were, what you were doing, and you probably had a little nerves going on, until he hit that shot. So take it away, George and Scott.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Denzel. Well,
Thank you.
George, I guess we had the stage for ourselves on the sideline. So here's the real deal. Okay. Number one, Clyde Drexler, before he went to Houston, was a member of the Portland Trailblazers. So until he subsequently got his ring. But what very few people realize, however, is that Vinnie Johnson was acquired by the Pistons for Greg Kelser is what he did. And we all know that Greg Kelser was a top tier pick. And, we all thought,
Absolutely.
It's just amazing how Magic and Kelser were top tier picks, and they played on the Michigan State championship team, and yet the irony of the whole thing, to me, is that Johnson's traded for. I mean, that's just surreal, isn't it?
Unbelievable. I mean, microwave, and I don't know if George Blaha gave him the nickname. I can't remember who exactly did. Maybe somebody on the team, but what a great team, Scott, with Isaiah and Joe Dumars and Dennis Rodman. I looked it up, Scott, and there were 11 Hall of Famers on that court, that series. Okay, because I'm including the 4 referees too. Okay, Dick Bavetta, Earl Strom, Darryl Garrettson, Hugh Evans, and of course Chuck Daly. Rick Edelman is in the Hall of Fame. Isaiah, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, the aforementioned Clyde Drexler, and Drazen Petrovic of Portland. And I'm sure I don't remember what the ratings were, Scott, but I'm sure New York was wringing their hands saying, oh my, Portland and Detroit is our finals. But what a heck of a finals, even though it was only 5 games. It was a great series.
Well, the reality of the whole thing is this. Number one, the Pistons came up beating the Lakers the previous year, and then they faced them before. What Portland did was it gave you a fresh opponent in there, aside from a lot of the bigger markets, is really what it did. And, regardless of where the nicknames come from, I think you mentioned Dennis Rodman on that list, right?
Yeah.
But we can't forget that Chuck Daly was the guy that got it done. He really did. I mean, he took a team over, I believe, from Scotty Robertson. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Jack McCloskey gave Scotty the boot and brought in Chuck Daly, kind of an unheralded guy down in Cleveland with the Cavaliers. Yeah.
Right. He ended up coaching the Cavaliers. Not a very good record, but everybody knew that his impressive background dated back to the 76ers, is what it did. But, but you got to remember, I don't know how well the ratings were, but when you have the bad boys image, the style of play and everything like that, and the fact that they beat everybody in their way, whether it was Boston and the Lakers, this team here, and I think they got hurt a little bit by the expansion draft when the Minnesota Timberwolves took Rick Mahorn, but luckily James Edwards stepped up and Dennis Rodman. It kind of makes me wonder how many more titles they would have had if Mahorn was there, because they were a very, very vicious team. And they set the stage for a play in the Eastern Conference, because when Pat Riley left the LA Lakers to go to the Miami Heat, he knew he had to have a physical club to be able to win championships. And the Pistons, they rattled the Celtics. They really did with their physical style of play. And you want to talk about whether grudges will be hold? Well, Isaiah Thomas and Larry Bird, as soon as Larry Bird became an executive with the Pacers, Isaiah Thomas knew that there was no way they could coexist with each other. So when you look at the bad boy success and the Portland Trailblazers, that was a good series. And another thing that should be pointed out is the Pistons had a very long losing streak in Portland too, didn't they? And everybody thought they were going to be written off. So,
definitely, yeah, they did not have much success, hardly any success at all in Portland. I'm glad you brought that up, Scott. And another thing is that the Pistons had a grueling Eastern Conference Finals. They won 7 games against the Chicago Bulls. So that toughened up the Pistons even more in that Eastern Finals, winning at 4-3. And by the way, that was the 3rd straight year that Detroit had disposed of the Bulls in the playoffs. So you talk about the rivalries, but then now you see a shift with the Bulls coming in, and not only the Celtics and the Lakers, but then Detroit had those great rivalries with the Bulls as well. But this game was phenomenal. And another thing, Scott, you probably might remember, and listeners, that was the last NBA game televised by CBS. And our friends, and I know you know a lot of these, I'll give you the names: Dick Stockton, Hubie Brown, Leslie Visser, and James Brown were the 4 that worked that game, game 5 and the whole finals there. And that was the last one, CBS, who did a terrific job, as you remember.
Yeah, I still wish today, and maybe I'm an old school guy, then again, Basketbros ideal show for us to be on anyways, because they're speaking our language here. But you know what? I still to this day wish that CBS had the NBA. I really do.
I like it too.
Yeah, I mean, what they have now is absolutely awful. I mean, they do. But yeah, I mean, I had a good relationship with a lot of the players in the Pistons locker room. I did. And, I really enjoyed not only covering games at the Pontiac Silverdome, but especially the Palace of Auburn Hills. And to this day, I'm really disappointed that they didn't stay there, but I understand why they moved them downtown. But, and we both got a piece of the floor from the Palace. So, when you talk about us living the whole thing, but yeah, I mean, let's face reality. Vinnie Johnson's last second shot. Well, I think the Pistons are the most unheralded and disrespected champions in the NBA because of that 2-year little run. It kind of reminds me a little bit about the fact that Houston had their 2-year run as well. So it's ironic that our co-host here had 2 titles by Houston, and then they had 2 titles by the Pistons. Is what they did.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, the way it plays out. So, let's face reality. Vinnie Johnson made the last shot. But when you talk about the key, Isaiah was your leader. Bill Laimbeer obviously made his presence felt. I think he was
yes.
Wasn't he one of the first outside centers that began shooting the perimeter shot a lot more?
I think he was. Yeah, I agree. I don't remember it being so prolific as what he did. I mean, Bob Lanier did a little bit of it, but
Well, not like Lambier, man.
But not like Lambier, right, right. And the other thing I wanted to mention while we're talking about the microwave is, I got to be honest, Scott, I had mixed thoughts when the Pistons made that announcement that they're going to retire his number. And I'm thinking, a sixth man? You're putting up a jersey for a sixth man, which means he wasn't even a starter on your team. But the more I think about it, he was so deserving of that honor. The number 15, as you know, in the rafters at the Palace of Auburn Hills, along with a lot of other jerseys, as we know, guys we just mentioned, Lambier, Thomas, Dumars, McCloskey, Daly, and of course Bing and Yardley and Lanier. But so many Pistons got their numbers retired, and then when Vinny got his, it was kind of a surprise to a lot of people, but very deserving.
Well, I mean, think about it. A sixth man to me in the NBA reminds me of a designated hitter in baseball and maybe even a closer, especially these days when you only get 1 or 2 innings. So it's a specialty type of role position, but you got to be good at it. And the fact that he obviously turned the complexion of a lot of games around. I mean, I don't even think John Sally will ever get his number retired. He was just a one-dimensional player. And Chuck Daly, though, we can't forget that Chuck Daly, to me, knew what I loved about Chuck. And I had a chance to eat with him every now and then, especially one time I had a good sit time with him over at Richfield Coliseum in Cleveland. He always told me, you know what, I can go out there and manipulate their minutes based on their practice time. And I think he once pulled John Sally out of a game because he didn't listen to instructions. So Chuck Daly didn't only dress well, but he made sure that his players dressed the part too. He wasn't taking any nonsense. The fact that he's an Olympic coach, he's won everything on the planet anyways. As an Olympic coach, an NBA championship, that goes without saying. But yeah, everybody wants to always say, when I think of Vinnie Johnson, the last second shot, kind of reminds me of Hoosiers, who's going to take that last shot anyways. And all of a sudden it becomes a storybook ending, and again, what am I saying here? That Hoosiers is one of my favorite basketball movies? Of course, but Vinny will be known for the shot. But to remember, back then the Pistons went about 10 deep on that lineup and put Vinnie Johnson in a position, to make that shot too. So you have to look at the overall thing. And again, Chuck Daly, to me, what can you say? We talk about Phil Jackson being the Zen master. Well, then I want to know what the equivalent name to Chuck Daly would be. You tell me.
Daddy Rich.
Well, yeah,
Daddy Rich because of the way he dressed. But he's a great coach, and taken from us too early. Several years ago, he passed on, and Chuck was a great guy, a great coach. He melded that group together so well. Mark Aguirre and like you mentioned, Sally and Rodman and all kinds of personalities. And boy, oh boy, he did one hell of a job keeping that team together. And you're right, Scott, what you said earlier. They probably could have won more than 2. They were robbed of Rick Mahorn. I believe he found out the day Detroit had its parade down Woodward Avenue. Rick was informed by McCloskey, the GM, that he was drafted in the expansion draft, like you said, to Minnesota. And who knows how many more Detroit could have won, but they did win one more with another group of players, Chauncey Billups and company later on. But that's another topic for another day on the show. But Vinnie Johnson. And another thing, Scott, he stayed in the community. He loved Detroit. He stayed here. He opened his own business here in Detroit. You can see him, once in a while, at games at Little Caesars Arena, coming out to support the Pistons. But he's another one that, like many athletes, once they get a taste of life in the Metro Detroit area, they love it and they stay here. And the list is a mile long, but Vinnie Johnson's right at the top of that list and opened up his own business. And it was great. It's great having him here still, is what I'm saying.
Oh, no, I'm with you. Hey, listen, you know what? From what I hear, that Vinnie Johnson's business is extremely lucrative. And one of the things I look for when I potentially bring on a guest is not only what you did on the playing surface between the lines, what you've done outside the lines. When I bring him on, that's a criteria I've established for our network now. But yeah, Vinnie Johnson, to me, I hear he's done a great job with his business ventures outside. You can't say that about a lot of athletes, depending on how they manage their money and what they've done. But yeah, Metro Detroit. John Sally, I think, moved back there, and a lot of other people. Well, yeah, when you have success in an area where you're really heralded there, then why wouldn't you go back? And there's some cities around the country where, I hear Portland's another great place. If you're actually, when we talk about Portland, that a lot of guys like to go back to that part of the country as well, because they were treated great, and the odds of them being able to make a living are enhanced because of what they brought to the community, both not only on the floor, but off the floor as well.
Yep. So, and it's been a great discussion. I think we're ready to bring back the fellas pretty soon here, Scott, but thanks for reliving these memories with me and our audience. As they might not know, they know now. Obviously, you and I have covered the Pistons for a great number of years, and that has brought great satisfaction to both you and I professionally as well.
Yeah, it really has. When you think about the way basketball is now, I think it gives you a bigger appreciation of what we were able to go through, how we were able to sit on the floor and watch games. Now they move you up, I think, a little bit now because they're selling the seats. But, I understand the business side of it. I really get it. But you know what, to me, I think that's what's so good about this Basketbros show here, as they're looking at what was good about the NBA, not what isn't very good anymore. And throughout the show here tonight, we've alluded to some of those things. But no, and that's what can I say? You and I will be old schools. Our birth certificates don't lie, and we covered basketball when it was really grand.
We sure did. We sure did.
Well, you got a little bit of history there, Denzel and Will. I really do.
Beautiful conversation, gentlemen.
Yes, absolutely. From two men who are there, that covered it, that have the experience. Like it was like two neighbors like trading off. Like two next door neighbors. So,
two best friends talking on the phone nightly.
Yeah. Two neighbors that have been working together 40 years. I'm still Batman, and he's still Robin. I don't care.
Absolutely, man.
I love that. That was pretty cool.
Great job, gentlemen.
This is great. That was like a last minute switch. I was like, you know what? I was like, this moment belongs to them because they talk so much about how they covered, the Pistons and this and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave the pound to them because I know they got some great memories and great commentary about it. So actually, thank you too for that awesome commentary.
Thanks a lot for being open-minded about having the two of us on the show where your main topic was that, because I think that, if you're not open-minded, we don't get an opportunity to educate the Sideline Sports audience. So I'll go ahead and pull Isaiah Thomas. Okay. I'm going to distribute the basketball to you guys for saying thanks a lot for getting us out so we can shoot the lights out of the subject.
No doubt. And, when I came across the topic, like I immediately thought of you two, and if even one of you couldn't make it to the show, I would have scrapped it. I would have saved it for another day. Because I was like, no, this.
I suggested it. You were great about it, and Will, my friend. Okay, I'm glad that both of you guys are on board so that we can make this a heck of a time, and it worked out.
Oh yeah,
What people have to understand about these guys is that Greg Kelser, the existing announcer, was traded for Vinnie Johnson, and that Greg Kelser and Magic played and won the 1979 NCAA championship together. And ironically, it just so happens that those two players are traded for each other. Now Kelser has been with the Pistons in their broadcast booth forever, and Johnson's in town. So
that worked out. Absolutely.
Yes. In the hallway while they visit and be like, hey.
What's that? Well,
no, I'm just joking around. I said they probably pass each other in the hallway somehow and be like, hey.
Well, I'm sure they do. Hallway. Well, come on. They probably eat together a lot when they're over at Little Caesars, like they did when they were at the Palace. Well,
yeah. And Greg Kelser, Kelser's been a great. Like you mentioned, Scott, Greg Kelser's been a great announcer, sitting alongside George Blaha these many years on Valley Sports Detroit. Hats off to Greg too.
I love former announcers calling games. Like down here, I'll go say this real quick. We have Del Curry for Charlotte.
Oh,
yeah. Well, just to throw a little teaser out to you guys, after the NBA season is over, I'm going to reach out to Steve Holman of the Atlanta Hawks. I got to know him from National Sports Media Association. So I have a phone call that I'm due to get him on. It's just I'm going to wait for the year.
That would be fun to have him on.
That would.
Working out a lot of things. I'm going to tell you what, Will and Denzel, my bag of trips is so wide that it goes all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And you guys have worked with me long enough to realize that where there's a will, there's a way, and no pun intended, Will Vogel. But anyways,
That was his original, like before we came across you guys. It's ironic you mentioned that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
but
this is full of ironies, isn't it?
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So many things you can do with the name Will. But we have about 5 minutes left. So last topic here, and that is the legend of Linsanity. So in the beginning of the 2010s, there was along came a guy named Jeremy Lin. And I actually wanted to kick this off with a quote from the late great Kobe Bryant himself about Jeremy Lin. This came after he scored 38 points on 10 Feb 2012. He said, players playing that well don't usually come out of nowhere. It seems like they come out of nowhere, but if you can go back and take a look, his skill level was probably there from the beginning. It probably just went unnoticed. That right there raises a lot of hairs because you can even allude it to today. How many players are really that good? They just weren't given a fair shot. You could probably allude it to many sports, like not just basketball, football, baseball, even, how many of them were really that good? They just never really got the shot. But, Jeremy Lin, and I think a lot of his hype was because he was Asian in a black dominated sport, but neither here nor there. He did come out of nowhere, seemingly. Let's see. Against Deron Williams, he had 25, 5, and 7. And then there was another time against John Wall, he had 23 and 10, his first career double-double. The New York Times wondered if Lin was the Knicks' grandest stroke of fortune since drafting Patrick Ewing in the 85 draft. It's probably not out of the realm of thought, but, just think how much damage he would have done had he gotten noticed earlier. So I wanted to start off with Will. Your thoughts on Jeremy Lin?
Man, Linsanity was fun. I loved Linsanity. The rise of an underdog story. The underdog stories are always the fun ones. And we'll talk about one next week. Trust me, there's a good one coming next week. I'm not going to spoil it yet. But anyway, yes, the underdog story is always fun, where the guy unheralded comes out of nowhere, wins the game like a Rudy or something like that. But Linsanity was awesome. Unfortunately, he didn't have it when he played for the Hornets, but it was awesome seeing him play for the Hornets for a few years, many years later. But the fun thing is he was the fourth guy on the depth chart. You know who else was like a fourth guy on the depth chart, but he was a third guy? It's like the Brock Purdy of this year. Brock Purdy was the third string quarterback for the 49ers. He was the fourth quarter. He was behind Mike Bibby and I think like Tony Douglas and someone else. He was also sent to the D League, now called the G League, and he put up a triple-double, and then the Knicks called him back up after that. He played 55 minutes in 23 games, and when he got promoted to start eventually, the Knicks had a 7-game win streak. And the guy who quoted in saying the key phrase, Linsanity, was actually his teammate, Meta World Peace, a.k.a. Rana Test. He was going off the court saying, Linsanity, Linsanity. And then he also got to play in the Rising Stars Challenge. But he also played for a handful of other teams. Like he played for the Hornets. He played for the Warriors for a little bit. He also played for the Rockets. He played for a bunch of other teams. He was loved by a lot of players, a lot of fans. He was the face of the Knicks, besides Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire, who were injured most of the time that he played. But, just a fun underdog story for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And not to mention, when Kobe Bryant stated that quote, that came after a game in which the Knicks won 92-85, and Lin outscored Kobe that night. Lin had 38, Kobe had 34. So, want to swing it to George Eichhorn real quick. Your thoughts on the
I know we're running out of time, but I agree with everything that's been said. Will, it was like a breath of fresh air. I think of a guy like Lin that came on board and just set the NBA on fire. it reminds me of another sport, baseball, where we had a fellow named Mark the Bird Fitterich here in Detroit, as Scott and I remember.
Yes.
And what a great job Mark the Bird Fitterich did. Short-lived, whatever, 19 wins, all-star game in 1976 in Philadelphia. He was on the American League squad, but very similar. I mean, he just set the world on fire, the sport on fire. Jeremy Lin, thank you for doing what you did. And thank you for Linsanity, because even though you burned the Pistons, I'm sure, more than a few games with your scoring, it was great seeing you. And what you did is ignited the NBA even more than it was at that time.
Boy, they
Yes,
could use them
absolutely.
now. They could use them now, that's for sure. But I should point out too that in this day and age, okay, when you start looking at the upcoming NFL draft, it isn't the players that are going to get drafted, but watch the undrafted free agents when they get brought on. Item number 2, you also have the XFL now, and you have the USFL. So you'll have an opportunity to see more and more guys get promoted with reps, and that's really the key. So you talk about the NFL draft, you got the G League, like you alluded to, Will, right? So, now it's more and more, I think just about every team has their own affiliate. I believe they do, or if they're not, they're like 95% there until they ultimately figure out. So while Insanity was good, I don't know whether you're going to see as many of those stories, because the feeder systems have gotten much, much better, so that these guys will have more opportunity to play, and then bring them on board. But there's no doubt in my mind, hey, you know what? Kobe Bryant probably figured more power to him if you can outscore me on a given night than you really worked your tail to outscore me. But I can tell you, Kobe Bryant isn't really worried about it because his career was far better. But, you also talk about Linsanity. What about Yao Ming opening up the Chinese market too?
No.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the Chinese market, Yao Ming and then Linsanity being a Oriental guy, I believe, as it sounds like to me, of course, now you have to also remember the NBA. I know we're running out of time, but I'll just conclude it with this thought. It's one of the most international games out there. Hockey certainly is. I don't think you have a lot of that in baseball. And then football, I don't think so. Between the NBA and hockey, I think that's where most of your international influences. And I'm not worried about the World Baseball Classic because I know there's a lot of international players, but the NBA certainly got it rolling first. So more power to Insanity, but watch out for the feeder systems. I don't know whether you'll see as many stories like this because people know. And you also have to remember one thing. You got social media nowadays where your name can get out there quicker anyways. Think about the slam dunk winner ends up getting a contract with the 76ers. Hello.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about when the little guy gets noticed. Notice that, we covered Jeremy Lin. Just previous, Scott and George were talking about Vinnie Johnson. It's something about when the little guy gets noticed. Vinnie Johnson was a bench player. Jeremy Lin was a bench player. You know what I mean? Something about when you get put in that moment that they come through. You can allude it to Robert Horry, Big Shot Bob. That's how he got his name. We may not be talking about Hall of Fame players, but big time players make big time plays in big time moments. Lynn did it. Johnson did it. Horry did it. Oh, go ahead, Will. I know you had something to say. Go ahead, man.
I'm going to say this real quick. When Kobe gave Lynn praise, it reminds me of the Jordan quote. I don't know if it's an exact quote. The only guy Jordan gave credit to that was better than him at one point was Drazen Petrovic. And Jordan did not like giving credit to any single one, whether it's Bird, Magic, Drexler, Olajuwon, whatever. He said it about Drazen Petrovic. So that's what reminds me of like
Hall
Jordan
of Famer
seeing it to Drazen and then Kobe talking about Lynn.
Excellent point, Will. That was good.
Most definitely. Well, we have reached the end of the show. Thanks everybody for tuning in and whoever liked and subscribed. Shout out to Martez Turner. He's got his own sports show out in the DFW area. Definitely go check that out, everybody. Martez Turner on Facebook. Shout out to Eric Wilson, JB Ellis, who's covering the Scouting Combine. Also Jake Maddox and John Shear. And Will, where can everybody find you?
You guys can find me here Sunday nights. Monday nights, you can find me on the South Florida Tribune. YouTube channel. Definitely check them out. They're a partner with ours at Sideline. They provide great content. Scott owns it. Wednesday night, you can find me on Smoking Jeremy B's NFL Roundtable on his YouTube channel. Thursday nights, I'm away from Sideline and those networks. I'm on a show called The Sip Off, hosted by Megan Price.
All right. And George, where can everybody find you, sir?
You can find me at gicorn@yahoo.com. I'm a proud member of the South Florida Tribune Network. I write for Scott under Motor City Tribune. I have a book that came out, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, and there's a link to that book to purchase it at the South Florida Tribune and the Motor City Tribune website. You can find me on Fire Up Michigan, 108 Stitches, all kinds of shows, Fire Up shows, Sports Exchange occasionally. I'm proud to be part of Scott's network. And also you can find me on Twitter at SNG Sports 99.
Excellent.
Right, I'll give you a
Scott.
footnote here. Okay, if you're watching it at Twitter, it's at Tribune South. Also, please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. I have all of my shows on there. And more importantly, our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll find everything you need to know about our company, both with the videos as well as the content. So I'm glad to be on this show. It's an awesome show.
All right. Well, y'all heard it here first, where everybody can be found at. So for Will Vogel, Scott, and our guest George Icon, I am Denzel Snipes, and we will see you in 7 days for a special March Madness episode of Basketbros. So be safe and later.